Good morning. Today we are going to study Easter 1916. This is another poem. Last time we did it, 1919. This poem is about the uprising that took place earlier than the Irish War of Independence. So we can go back to the Irish War of Independence, and we're going to go back to the Wikipedia dictionary, and then I'm going to show you another picture, which is about Francis Bacon, because actually in my essay I'm talking about two things. One is about the war, about the poem. The other is about the painter's painting. So my essay is actually a comparison between Yeats's poem and a painter's painting, who is the painter is Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon. Okay, first let's look at the two pages. Okay, two different dictionary items, right? Actually, the war lasted for, look at this, the date, right? Started January 21st, 1919, and ended in 1921, right? You can have a look at the numbers. Actually, a lot of people died. Actually, Irish Republican Army, the Forces Army, the IRA had about 15,000 men, and the British Army had 20,000 soldiers, and there was Royal Irish Constabulary, the policemen, 9,700, and the Black and Tan, 7,000, and Auxiliary Division, 1,400, Ulster Special Constabulary, 4,000. So the UK had a much larger number of soldiers compared with IRA. IRA had only 15,000 people, but they won, right? These wars were guerrilla wars, right? And as a result of the war, 2,014 people died, and 750 civilians were dead as a result of war. And at the end of the war, they went into the treaty, and the Southern Ireland became free state, free Irish state, as a result of this war. Okay. Here are the figures, right? And the Easter Rising took place earlier in 1916, but in fact the Irish War had begun when the Easter Rising took place, right? Actually, they say that the Irish War lasted for how many days? 19, 20, 21, 3 years, but in fact, it had taken place earlier, right? And in this poem, I'm talking about actually the poem is talking about the war, but it is also about something else, something that happens over and over again, right? And I'd like to make a comparison between this poem and the painting by Francis Bacon. And I'm going to show you the Francis Bacon. This is Bacon, an Irish-born British figurative painter. He is known for his bold, graphic, emotionally raw imagery. This is the image, Francis Bacon. A study for self-portrait. This one, right? This is the 3 studies for the figures at the base of a crucifixion. Probably it's one of the most famous paintings. What is this? They are most expensive paintings these days. Hand. Human figure, head. And can you see what this is? After Velázquez's portrait of Pope Innocent X. He was influenced by Velázquez, and actually he was a carpenter, right? And he saw Picasso's exhibition. And after looking at the exhibition by Picasso, he decided to become a painter. He is a self-taught painter, right? He had never attended an art school. This one is a head, the head of George Dyer. He was homosexual, and he had a lover. Some lovers. George Dyer is one of his lovers. Actually, last summer I went to the municipal gallery, city gallery of Dublin, and there is a studio. And this is the studio that had stood in London. This is the last studio of Francis Bacon, and they disassembled everything and put them together back in the gallery. And if you go there, you'll be surprised. There are so many. It's horrible. It's like mess. This looks like a pigsty. And on the floor there are so many clippings cut from magazines, books, and things like that. Everything, and the door. The door was his palette, right? He mixed paint on the door, and it's terrible. But when you look at it very carefully, you'll be surprised. Everything is unified. Everything is in harmony, and his paintings are very cleanly done. And in his painting, forms evolve by themselves, right? And he said that forms evolve. Forms come into being by themselves, right? It's like Yeats's painting, Yeats's poems, right? Last time we read 1919, and it consists of sections, right? Sections, and all the sections are different, and each section are different from other sections. And today we are going to read another poem. It's 1916, but the poem is suddenly in the middle of the poem, you'll see that some description of nature, right? Probably you'll think, oh, it's not part of the poem, but it is, right? Like Francis Bacon did, right? Okay, in order to have an idea of the whole poem, let's look at the poem. It's the 1916. It's 1916. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces, from counter or desk among gray 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale of jibe to please your companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lived where motlies worn. All change utterly, a troubled beauty is born. These two lines are repeated at the end of the poem, in the last stanza. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers, when, young and beautiful, she rode to harriers? This man had kept the school and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had dreamed, a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart. Yet I remember him in the song. He too has reigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seem enchant to stone, to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, and the horse plushes within it. The long-legged hand moor hands dive, hands to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they leave the stones in the midst of all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when mate suffice, that is heaven's part, all part to murmur name upon name, as a mother names a child. When sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild, what is it but nightfall? No, not nightfall, but death. Was it needless death after all? For England they may keep faith, for all that is done and said, we know their dream, enough to know they dream they're not dead. And what if excessive love bewildered them till they died? I write it out in a verse. Macdonough, MacBride, Conley and Pierce, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Okay, this is the poem, and okay. You got the essay? Let's go to page 153 first, because section 4 is talking about the form. Page 153, section 4. Where does form come from? I saw death made while alive, Death Mask of William Blake in Francis Bacon's large studio in Dublin City Gallery. His London studio was removed piece by piece by archaeologists and reassembled in the gallery. It looks like the original studio he had worked in. The way Francis Bacon made his painting attracts my attention. He makes use of clippings of all kinds of material, photographs, magazines, and other arts. Thousands of things left to pile up on the table and floor of his studio. This is how he creates art. He got impression from arts and artists and writers. In an interview, Bacon says, "I'm sure that every artist fits into a context, is influenced by his particular heritage and is placed at a certain point in time. Just as he is using all this ingenuity to hit the same nail persistently." But that's another story. What is true, though, is that even if you manage to understand where artists are coming from, what makes one work fail and another work succeed remains a mystery. I don't even understand how certain works that we've already talked about so much and about which so much has been written have managed to hold out. The most important thing is to look at the painting, to read the poetry or listen to the music, not in order to understand or to know it, but to feel something. That is to say, if Bacon does not have feelings when he sees or hears something, he does not like it. He did not like Blake's paintings, William Blake, the poet. Even though he did paintings of Blake's death mask, he just happened to get it from a person, he said. He did not like Beckett, Samuel Beckett either, although critics compare his work with Beckett's. And in an interview in which Beckett's work was discussed, Bacon says that Beckett has tried to say a lot by cutting as much as possible in order to leave nothing superfluous, and that nothing left, and in the end his work sounds hollow and completely empty. It's quite interesting. Did you read Beckett's plays? It's like bone, nothing left, right? But very beautiful. But Francis Bacon didn't like it. I think Bacon finds Beckett's way of writing interesting, but that he knows how to follow his instinct, honing his text painting down, his text down, as Yeats did in East 1916. He also said that because Yeats and Synge wrote differently than others, he liked them. Francis Bacon liked Synge, John Synge, and Yeats. Form, accomplished form, is something in common with Blake, Yeats, and Bacon. Blake's the tiger, a point. Yeats is sailing to Byzantium, and Bacon's study after Velázquez's portrait Paul Innocent 10, 1995, all on canvas. I can imagine each working on his work. The two poems and painting are very different, yet each of them could represent how they work on them, I imagine, in a certain way. Blake, I quote from his poem, Tiger, tiger burning bright, in the forest of night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Yeats' poem. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make of hammered gold and gold enameling, to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past, or passing, or to come. Bacon's. Study of Velázquez's portrait of Paul Innocent 10, 1953, or study for portrait 3, after the life mask of William Blake. When I work, I only have a vague idea. This is Francis Bacon's words. When I work, I only have a vague idea, sometimes even no idea at all, of what I want to do. Don't you find it interesting? Painter does not know what he's doing when he is painting. This is true. Right? Most of the time, it has nothing to do with the original idea, if indeed I had one to start off with. In other respects, it is also true that I have a curious type of self-discipline, which is probably an asset, because painting doesn't consist of throwing paint at the canvas. I don't have a master plan when I begin a canvas, but there is a quiet scale which, together with time and age, amounts to a certain ability. Now you understand how you can understand how his painting came into being, right? He doesn't know what to do, but eventually something great is coming out of it, based on his what? His acquired skill with time and age, right? Okay, let's go back to the first page. There is the summary of this essay, abstract. Yeats's poem, Yeats 1916, has been much researched and written about, but in fact, the poem's form in relation to content has not received enough attention. That is to say, the external poem having the main focus, the political, the social, and even the psychological, not the poem itself as dynamic force of terrible beauty. Yeats has paid so much attention to fashioning significance by way of form. If that is considered, it is time we should read the poem's form as meaning, so we can have a deeper understanding and fuller appreciation of this poem. I see that Yeats 1916 originates from the poetics of paradox, the paradoxical natures of man and language. I focus on feeling and thinking of the poem's terrible beauty to find that Yeats 1916 is the best lyrical elegy of the 20th century with multifarious meanings, as Yeats desired, by hiding his intention in it in perfect abstraction of the form he has sought for life. Okay, page 146, section 1. Look at the epigraph, Francis Bacon. Painting is a world of its own. It's self-sufficient, right? This is the intention of the essay, right? I have long puzzled by Yeats 1916's form of beauty and complexity, epitomized by the strangeness of terrible beauty that continually stirs my mind and heart even after it's been read and put aside. The 4 stanzas each end with an interlocking rhyme scheme of 3 lines, ABA, 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 if you see only the last 3 lines. The 4 stanzas, the first has 16 lines with 2 sentences. The second, 24 lines with 5 sentences. The third, 16 lines with 2 sentences. The fourth, 24 lines with 5 sentences. That is 2, 24, 5, 16, 2, 24, 5. Repetition, right? You have a sense of form here, right? That is, the stanzas are interlocked, and each stanza has interlocking rhymes, ABA, BCD, CD. Though the lead lines are slightly varied, yet they too are woven by interlocked rhymes. I have thought it strange, but I find that Wendler was the first scholar to have found that the line lengths represent the date of the Easter rising on April 24th, 1916. Now, can you understand? 24, 24, 16, 16. Amazing, right? And the secret was revealed by Helen Wendler, along with me, right? The 4 stanzas represent the 4th month. The 24 lines, stanzas, represent the date of the rising. And 2 16-line stanzas represent day. of the rising, Wendler sums up the form. Easter 1916, AB by 4, AB by 6, like this. Why this abstraction of the poem? It may reflect the Yeats, who is the strange, chaotic, varied, and completely unified personality. As Anne Sedlmeier concludes her new edited Letters of Yeats and George. Actually, this is a very good biography by Sedlmeier, and this is concluding words by Sedlmeier. Furthermore, to me, the development of mental scheme, in contrast to the rhyme scheme, is likewise interlocked. Except for the beginning stanza, the narrator in the beginning stanza and the stanza calmly, compared with the two more repetitions of the same cry in stanzas 2 and 4, crying, being certain that they and I but lived, were motley swarm, all changed utterly, a terrible beauty's born. Section 2, when my mind was still filled with the strange beauty of the poem, after having read it in a seminar led by Professor Wendler in Sligo a few days before, on Sunday, 18th August 2013, I visited the Dublin City Gallery and meditated upon a painting by Francis Bacon. The truths of terrible beauty dawned upon me all of a sudden. The key to the poem's form and substance is paradox in nature, which exists universally in the world we live in, not only in Ireland, then and there. But what I feel about this poem and the painting by Bacon, I thought, must be the same. To distance what I feel from my subjective introspection, I rely on an authority on Francis Bacon and the Yeatsian, who has spent much time editing George Yeats' letters, first on Bacon. Francis Bacon was one of the past century's most elusive and enigmatic creative geniuses. However much his avowed aim was, an albeit sophisticated simplicity, he remained a deeply complex person. Bacon was keenly aware of the underlying contradiction, and whether he was talking or painting, he strove consciously towards absolute clarity and directness. At the same time, Bacon knew that every attempt to elucidate the warring confusion within him, which was, of course, also the mainspring of his creativity, could at best be only partially successful. There it is. He once said to me disarmingly, I'm what's called completely complicated. Pépiard is a professor at Yale, I think. And Yeats' terrible beauty, compared with Bacon's simply complicated beauty, the two have something common. They search for clarity and directness in art, one in language, the other in picture, in the face of complexity, or what I call paradoxia. Both pursue form. Yeats invents conventional form, Bacon invents new form based on modern conditions of man. If you look at any of Bacon's painting, it is too complicated but terribly beautiful. 3 Studies for a Self-Portrait, 1967, is the very picture that defines the essence of Bacon's art. One of the most reliable biographers of Yeats, Anne Sedlmeier's final character analysis of Yeats is summed up: the strange, chaotic, varied, and completely unified personality. She, after spending years editing the letters of Yeats and George, his wife George, quotes an insightful characterization of her hero, Yeats, sympathizing with George, who was widowed with only 45, widowed when 46. George was left to care for 2 teenage children. She would always miss Yeats, the strange, chaotic, varied, and completely unified personality with whom she had shared so much. It is a precise and definite character analysis that corresponds with the definition of Bacon by Michael Pépiard, an authority on Bacon, and it is of great importance, for it is part of a postscript of a great Yeats scholar who spent years editing their letters. Section 3. Easter 1916's first stanza begins calmly, but the ending is not calm. The depiction of the middle class is disparaging, but unexpectedly he equates himself with them by use of a coordinating conjunction and, being certain that they and I but lived where motley sworn. Isn't a complex and brave act of courage to disparage himself in an occasional poem, a group of elegy, to be read by all? It just reminds me of Bacon, who distorts himself. So in his self-portrait, he looks like a piece of butchered head of a pig or a mutilated head of a human, namely in his 3 studies of self-portrait. Let me begin a comparison. The first stanza begins, I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. Nothing seems unusual in this opening sentence. It is calm and even prosaic, like a monologue, but it feels swift and fast. Why? Isn't it strange? Strange like the Francis Bacon background of 3 studies for self-portrait, which is green and calm, contrasted with the distorted, tormented self in it. Yet dislike green so much. But he, in at least 1916, borrows the street ballad's green he may have heard at the time, whatever green is worn. But in fact, this beginning stanza is a gem Yeats has just hewn, cut out of a rough stone, which begins his great elegy in ballad form. It is in fact the poetics he has long sought that is realized, a powerful, passionate syntax, a complete coincidence between period and stanza as quoted below. Style is taken from Yeats's book, Essays Introduction. Style is almost unconscious. It's like San Francis' idea of art, right? Style is almost unconscious. I know what I have tried to do, little what I've done. The English mind is meditative, rich, deliberate. It may remember the Thames Valley. I plan to write short relics or poetic drama where everyday speech should be short and concentrated, knit by dramatic tension. I must seek, not as Wordsworth thought, words in common use, but a powerful, passionate syntax, and the complete coincidence between period and stanza. Because I need a passionate syntax for passionate subject matter, I compel myself to accept those traditional meters that have developed with the language. So he's different from Wordsworth, right? To confirm this poetics in this stanza, I supply the last of lines, which each end with self-sufficient form and substance. That is, each line is an independent image with significance. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club. At this moment I linger a while, pondering why the narrator has done it. That is to say, nodding the head or saying polite meaningless words, repeat twice. Even trying to think of a mocking tale or jibe to please a companion. Yes, to make him happy. But the more important reason is that I have lived with them and that they and I were motley. Albright, Daniel Albright, provides an excellent introduction to this poem by touching on the mutation of comedy, that is, motley, into tragedy, tragic beauty, joy. Yeats described the differences between the 2 genres, comedy and tragedy, as follows. Tragedy must always be a drowning and breaking of the dikes that separate man from man, and it is upon these dikes comedy keeps house. And they quoted a phrase of Congreve's to define humor itself, the fountain of comedy as a singular and avoidable way of doing anything peculiar to one man only. The rebels of Easter 1916 are comedians, full of idiosyncrasy, of character, until the rebellion begins. Then, under a kind of historical pressure, coal fuses in diamond, and the rebels grow impersonal, universal, outside the flux of nature, no more individual than stones or tombstones. In his portraits of the rebels, Yeats shows how attractive youth somewhat lacks sweetness of disposition, The comic boastfulness can be altered by extreme tension into self-resignation and self-oblivion. What is quoted above is coherent in the context and flow of the poem East 1916, which transmutes the young rebels into storm, a terrible beauty. But my reading diverges here with this. Them here in this beginning stanza are the motley, the clowns, who are just eager to please companions around him, who are met in the street or in the club. They are the middle class Yeats despises, but witnessing the tragic executions of the rebels, he wished to count himself among them, thus disparaging himself, for he was not brave enough to be part of the noble cause of rebels, or at least misunderstood them. That is to say, there are two kinds of people. One is like him and the common comedians on the street. The other, the noble kind, like the young rebels. The act of turning himself into comedians who were motley. Notice also the green the Republicans wear. The color green he also despised, but which he ennobles here in this particular line. What a complex poem it is, as Bacon portrays. Causes himself to be changed utterly, which is tragic and which is terribly beautiful. Another dimension hidden in this cry is the narrator's hidden object of turning this poem into abstraction, as he has fashioned this poem in street form, in the secret form. 4 stanzas, April, 16 lines, the year of the rising, 24 lines, the day of rising, in a measure of military bits. And the same is achieved. The best modern elegy is in reinvented form. A terrible beauty is born, which means the poem Easter 1916, an instance of perfect abstract art as achieved by Francis Bacon. This reading is strengthened by the 4th and final stanza's first person's open conclusion. I write it out in a verse. A terrible beauty is born. Does the narrator mean that all the rebel leaders are changed utterly? A terrible beauty is born? Or does the narrator mean that he writes it out in a verse? So, a terrible beauty is born, a poem of terrible beauty is born. I tend to conclude that it means both, but my preference for the reading of this poem is that Yeats' secret embedded in the poem through abstraction. Secret wish to make it the best of best elegy in English is being realized by this poem. There's a terrible beauty, that is, this poem, Easter 1916, is born, which is the final line of this poem. We'll see that this seemingly calm first stanza is deceptive once it is spoken aloud, as if Yeats recited it according to Wendler. Each line is built in military bits. To exemplify this, she makes some changes in the bits in a stanza to illustrate how swift and passionate this original stanzaic form of his is. She takes the concluding part of the last stanza. This last stanza goes back to the first-person narrator, I, as in the first line of the beginning stanza. I have met them at close of day. The concluding part of stanza 4, as explained by Wendler. I write it out in a verse, step. MacDonough and McBride, step. Conley and Pierce, step. Now, end time to be, step. Whatever grain is one, step. Are changed and changed utterly, step. A terrible beauty is born. The trimeter quatrain has a pause at the end of each line, a built-in, unsounded fourth beat which suggests an invisible but implicit march step. Left, right, like that. And then to prove that each choice of meter has a distinctive, imaginative, and mimetic advantage, she further experiments with the poem stanza to show how it loses kinetic martial tension when it's turned into 4-bit lines. Okay, Wendler changed the poem a little bit, and it loses the bit. I write it out in body verse, MacDonough and Bold, McBride, and soldiers, Conley and Pierce, now and every time to be, wherever grains by patriots won are changed forever utterly, a terrible beauty is newly born. Do you like it? It's horrible, right? So, even though the changes made in the stanza are quite sound quite unnatural. The point she's made makes sense, right? Okay, I'll skip section 4. Okay. How many sections? Okay, I'll stop here. We'll take 10 minutes break and then we'll go to the point. Okay.